We're talking heat transfer in this video. Heat transfer is how thermal energy moves from warmer objects to cooler objects. The three types of heat transfer: conduction, convection, and radiation. So let's start breaking down the first type, conduction. So conduction, we'll think of it as direct contact heat transfer. Okay? So conduction is the transfer of thermal energy between particles of matter that are touching. That's the key. Particles are touching. So we're usually thinking about solids. Thermal energy moves from warmer particles to cooler ones. That's in conduction, but it's also in convection and radiation. Also in conduction, we can see touching a hot pan would be an example, or holding ice cubes would be an example of conduction or heat transfer through this method called conduction. So maybe you've experienced this where you touch something that's the same temperature but of different substances, and like metal and wood in this example, and metal feels colder. Or maybe it's like you're on the rug and then you go onto a tile floor. It feels cooler even though it's the same temperature in the room. So why is this? It has to do with how that energy is being transferred by direct contact. The second type is convection, where we're thinking about heat transferring in fluids now. Okay, so it happens in fluids, and fluids, people a lot of think of fluids as liquids, but gases are also fluids. Okay, so as the fluid warms, it expands and rises, and then we get this water, in this case the warmer water, rising to the top, and then as it cools, that it's going to become more dense and sink. So you create these things called convection currents. So you can see that red and blue arrow showing now the hotter water is rising, the colder water is lowering. As it gets to the heat source, it'll heat up and rise again. So we get these circular currents in fluids. An example we see with hot air balloons. A hot air balloon rising because the air is heating up, it's becoming less dense, it's rising, and then the air, as it cools, is away from a heat source, it's going to fall, and you get these convection currents in a hot air balloon. We also see them in oceans, and we're going to get into that more when we study weather and atmosphere. The third type of heat transfer is radiation, and this happens through waves. All right, so heat transfer through electromagnetic waves, it does not require matter. Okay, so in conduction, it's through the solids. Convection through fluids, so liquids and gases. Now, radiation does not require matter for heat to travel through. Okay, an example, the sun's energy through empty space warms up our Earth, so we can go out there and enjoy that sun, get that vitamin D, feeling the sun's warmth. Also, sitting around a campfire, so you can feel that heat radiating right off of the fire. So just a quick review. Conduction in action. Common example thinking through is cooking something directly on that source of heat. So eggs and bacon frying on a pan. That's by direct contact. Okay. So in this case, the heat's transferring from the stove to the pan, and then from the pan to the food. In convection, like we have this radiator, it gives off heat, so it's called a radiator, but it's convection, so that heat coming from the radiator heating up the air in the room, the hot air rises. As you get near the window, it cools off, that cold air is going to sink, we get those convection currents. So that's a big cue. When you see those convection currents in diagrams, you know we're talking about convection, those blue and red arrows. And then the third, again, radiation. Everything that is not at absolute zero is going to emit some radiation. You ever stand next to someone, you can feel the warmth coming off of them, especially after maybe you've run that mile in PE or whatnot. Everything's radiating heat unless it is at absolute zero. The hotter the object is, the more radiation it emits. So as we said, you radiate heat as well. So most things are going to be more than one type of heat transfer taking place at the same time, right? So often involves multiple methods. Like if you're boiling water, you got that heat source that's radiating heat, but the pan's directly touching it from the stove to the pot. And then the water, some of it's in direct contact, but there's other water that's not. So we're getting the circulation of the water through boiling, and you can see the steam coming off of it, that change in states of matter. We can see that radiation. We see all three of those transfer methods happening in this one image. So the review, the big three. Conduction happens by direct contact. We get movement in fluids through this convection. And in radiation, it's waves that is allowing this energy to transfer through.